The message came through the emergency channels at dawn on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Zayla Kimshaw was drinking her morning coffee when her aide burst into the office with a datapad clutched in trembling hands. "Ma'am, you need to see this immediately," the young man said, his voice tight with worry. Zayla set down her cup and took the pad. The holographic display showed a scaled creature with silver skin and large, dark eyes. The being's normally calm demeanor was broken by obvious fear and desperation. "I am Thiska of the Kithara Coalition Council," the creature began. "We send this message to all civilized species in our final hours of need. The Vex High Empire has begun what can only be called genocide against our people." Zayla leaned back in her chair. She had heard whispers of trouble in the outer systems, but nothing this serious. The Kithara Coalition was known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and skilled healers. Their medical advances had saved countless lives across dozens of species. The hologram continued. "3 of our 7 worlds have fallen. The Vex High do not simply conquer. They use weapons that poison our soil and water. They capture our civilians and use them for experiments. Our children." Thiska's voice broke. "They use our children as living shields in their attacks." Zayla's jaw tightened. She had seen war before, but targeting civilians was something else entirely. The coffee in her stomach turned sour. "We have asked the Galactic Hegemony for help. They offer economic sanctions that will take years to work. The Stellar Assembly promises diplomatic pressure. The Trade Concordat speaks of humanitarian aid shipments." Thiska spread its hands in a gesture of helplessness. "But sanctions do not stop plasma cannons. Diplomatic notes do not save children from experimentation." The being looked directly into the recording device. "We know little of humanity beyond your reputation for surviving impossible worlds. But we have heard that humans understand survival in ways others do not. We ask for any aid you can provide: medical supplies, refugee assistance, anything that might help our people endure what is coming." The message ended. Zayla stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Her aide shifted nervously beside her desk. "Ma'am, what should I tell the communications center?" Zayla stood up and walked to the window. Nexus Prime stretched out below her, a gleaming city where dozens of species lived and worked together in peace. It was the kind of place the Kithara Coalition worlds had been before the Vex High came. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Park on the Unconquerable," she said. "Ma'am, that ship is 3 systems away on patrol duty. I don't care if it's in another galaxy. Get me Admiral Park, now." Her aide hurried out. Zayla returned to her desk and pulled up intelligence files on the Vex High Empire. What she saw made her anger burn brighter. The Empire had conquered 17 systems in the past 5 years. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They erased them. The Vex High would land on a world and demand complete surrender. If the inhabitants refused, they deployed bioweapons that slowly poisoned the environment. If the people tried to flee, Vex High ships hunted them down. If they hid, the Empire used captured civilians to draw them out. Most disturbing were the reports of Vex High research facilities. They studied other species like laboratory animals, testing biological weapons and psychological torture techniques. The Empire called it understanding inferior forms of life. Everyone else called it what it was. Her communication system chimed. Admiral Park Jin-Soo's weathered face appeared on the screen. The old soldier looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Ambassador Kim Shaw, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Admiral, I'm sending you a priority message we received from the Kithara Coalition. They're asking for humanitarian aid." Park frowned. "The Coalition? Those are the medical traders, right? What kind of trouble are they in?" "The Vex High Empire is committing genocide. 3 worlds down. 4 to go. They're asking for medical supplies and refugee assistance." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Send me everything you have on the situation. I'll review it and get back to you within the hour. Admiral, there's something else. The coalition representatives seem to think we might be their only hope. The other galactic powers are offering the usual diplomatic responses. Park's expression darkened. I see. In that case, give me 30 minutes. The connection ended. Zila spent the next half hour reviewing more intelligence reports. The Vex High Empire was methodical in its cruelty. They had turned genocide into a science, studying the most effective ways to break different species' will to resist. When Park called back, his tone was different, colder. Ambassador, I've reviewed the files. This is a clear case of systematic extermination. Any aid possible, medical supplies, refugee assistance, anything to help their people survive. Park was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Send a reply to the coalition. Tell them we don't offer aid. We bring solutions. Zila blinked. Admiral, I don't understand. Zila blinked. I don't understand. The coalition asked for medical supplies and refugee assistance. That's aid. Aid is temporary. Aid is what you give when you can't actually solve the problem. Park leaned forward. When humans see genocide, we don't send care packages. We send fleets. You're talking about military intervention. I'm talking about stopping genocide. The Vex High Empire has decided that an entire species should cease to exist. That decision ends today. Zila felt a chill run down her spine. Admiral, a military response could escalate the situation. It could destabilize the entire region. Park's smile was cold as winter on Earth's polar ice. Ambassador, genocide is already the worst possible situation. It doesn't escalate from there. It just continues until someone with the will and power to stop it shows up. He stood up, and Zayla could see crew members moving rapidly behind him. The ship was already preparing for action. 18 Withry. 18 Withry. I'm transmitting a priority message to Earth Command. Authorization code. Genocide protocol. This is exactly the kind of situation our intervention doctrine was designed for. Park's expression softened slightly. The coalition asked for any aid possible. We're going to give them exactly what they need. The transmission ended. Zila sat alone in her office, staring at the communications console. In all her years as a diplomat, she had learned to solve problems with words, treaties, and careful negotiation. But some problems couldn't be talked away. She opened a new message channel and began recording her reply to Thiska of the Kithara Coalition. Her words would change everything. Representative Thiska, humanity has received your message. We do not offer aid in the traditional sense. We provide solutions. Prepare your people. Help is coming. 47 hours after Ambassador Kim Shaw sent her message, space around the coalition border systems lit up like a festival. Hyperspace gates opened in perfect formation, and the first human vessels emerged from the void. Thiska stood on the observation deck of the coalition emergency command station, watching sensors display impossible readings. 300 contacts. 300 ships had just appeared at their border, each one larger than anything the coalition had ever built. This cannot be correct, whispered Commander Velnox, the coalition's military advisor. His species had 4 arms, and all of them were shaking as he studied the sensor data. These readings show vessels over 2 kilometers in length. The lead ship was massive beyond comprehension. It moved through space like a moving mountain, bristling with weapons and armor that seemed to bend light around them. Smaller ships flanked it in formations that looked more like a storm than a fleet. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer. They're requesting permission to establish tactical command coordination. Thiska nodded with one of his head tentacles. Accept the transmission. The holographic display filled with a human face. The being was older, with silver hair, and dark eyes that seemed to weigh everything they looked at. His uniform was simple but carried symbols that spoke of authority and experience. "I am Admiral Park Jin-soo of the 5th Expeditionary Fleet. You are Representative Thiska?" "Yes, Admiral." We did not expect a military response to our request for aid." The human's expression was calm but firm. "Representative, you asked for help against genocide. This is how humanity provides that help." Behind the Admiral, Thiska could see humans moving with purpose and precision. Their ship appeared to be preparing for something, though he couldn't tell what. "Admiral Park, we are grateful for any assistance, but we requested medical supplies and refugee support. We did not ask you to risk your lives in combat." Park leaned forward slightly. "Representative, let me explain something about human doctrine. When we encounter entities that commit systematic murder of civilians, particularly children, we do not negotiate. We do not attempt diplomatic solutions. We eliminate the threat." The words sent a chill through the Coalition Command Center. Velnox stepped forward. "Admiral, the Vex-High Empire is a major power with over 40 systems under their control. Their military technology is advanced, and their fleet numbers in the thousands. We appreciate your willingness to help, but 300 ships cannot stop an entire empire." Admiral Park's smile was patient but cold. "Commander, you're thinking about this conflict in traditional terms. Fleet versus fleet. System versus system. That's not how humans fight genocidal regimes." The Admiral gestured, and the display behind him changed to show a tactical overview of Vex's high space. Red markers indicated military installations, communication hubs, and command centers. Thiska was surprised to see how detailed the human intelligence was. "We have been monitoring the Vex-High Empire's expansion patterns for 18 months. Every major installation has been mapped. Every communication network has been analyzed. Every supply line has been tracked." "You've been watching them for 18 months?" Thiska asked. "Humanity monitors all expansionist regimes that show patterns of civilian targeting. We don't wait for permission to gather intelligence on potential genocide operations." Park's tone was matter-of-fact. "We wait for legal justification to act. Marketator. We wait for legal justification. We wait for legal justification. Also." The implications hit Thiska like a physical blow. "You were already prepared for this. Thanks for watching. Now, we were prepared for the possibility of this. Your request for aid provided the legal framework for intervention." Admiral Park stood up. "Representative, I want to be very clear about what happens next. This is not a traditional military campaign. This is a human response to genocide, which means it follows human rules." Tro. Velnox's forearms were now motionless. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we fight until the Vex-High Empire surrenders unconditionally or ceases to exist as a functional government. There will be no partial victories, no negotiated settlements, no territorial compromises. Genocide is a binary condition. You either commit it or you don't. You either stop it or you don't." The human turned to someone off-screen and spoke briefly in his own language. When he looked back, his expression had hardened. "We have just received confirmation that Vex-High forces have begun orbital bombardment of civilian targets on Coalition world Thys Minor. They are using captured Coalition citizens as human shields for their ground installations." Thiska felt his heart stop. Thys Minor was his birth world. His family was there. Admiral Park continued without emotion. "This confirms that the Vex-High Empire meets all criteria for immediate intervention under human military doctrine. The rules of engagement are now active." "What rules of engagement?" Velnox asked. "Complete elimination of Vex-High military capacity. Rescue and protection of all civilian populations. Capture and trial of all individuals involved in genocide operations." Park paused. "And if any Vex-High forces continue to use civilians as shields, Those forces will be eliminated with precision fire that does not endanger the hostages. The casual way he said it made Thiska's skin crawl. Admiral, how is that possible? Human targeting systems are very advanced, Representative. We can place ordnance within centimeters of intended targets, at ranges exceeding 50 kilometers. Vex high shields and armor are not effective against human weapons. Behind Park, Thiska could see display screens showing fleet movements. Human ships were dividing into smaller groups, each heading toward different parts of Vex high space. It looked less like a traditional attack and more like a precisely coordinated operation. How many ships do you have coming? Velnox asked. The 5th Expeditionary Fleet consists of 300 ships. However, we also have assets already in position throughout Vex high territory. Assets? Human intelligence operatives, communication monitoring stations, and other resources that have been gathering information and preparing for potential intervention operations. Admiral Park's expression showed no emotion. The Vex High Empire is about to discover that we know more about their capabilities and positions than they know about ours. Thiska looked at the tactical display again. The human fleet wasn't just arriving at the border. They were moving with purpose toward specific targets throughout Vex High space. Each group seemed to know exactly where it was going. Admiral, what do you need from the coalition? Stay out of our way. Provide us with updated intelligence on civilian population centers, and prepare refugee facilities for liberated populations. Park leaned back. Representative, I want you to understand something. Your people asked for any aid possible. We are going to provide exactly what you need to ensure this never happens again. And what is that? Admiral Park's smile was cold and final. The complete elimination of the Vex High Empire's ability to threaten anyone, ever again. The transmission ended. Thiska stood in the sudden silence of the command center, watching as human ships accelerated toward Vex High space. Each vessel moved with mechanical precision, like pieces of a vast machine that had been built for one specific purpose. Velnox broke the silence. Representative, what have we done? Thiska thought about his family on Thys Minor, about the children being used as shields, about the slow death of his species under Vex High bioweapons. Then he thought about the cold certainty in Admiral Park's voice. We asked humanity for aid, he said quietly. Outside, the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the promise of a solution that would be as final as it was terrible. Emperor Krexhai of the Vex High Empire was reviewing conquest reports when his military advisor rushed into the throne chamber. The advisor's scales were pale with fear, and his breathing was rapid. Your Magnificence, we have a problem at the coalition border. The Emperor didn't look up from his reports. 3 coalition worlds had fallen in the past month, and the remaining 4 would surrender within weeks. The galaxy's other powers had responded with the usual diplomatic protests and economic sanctions. Nothing that would actually stop the inevitable. What kind of problem? Have the coalition found more ships to throw away? No. Your Magnificence, a new species has arrived. They call themselves humans. 300 warships just appeared at our border. Krexhai finally looked up. 300 ships was significant, but not overwhelming. The Empire maintained 5,000 vessels across 40 systems. Have they made demands? None. Your Magnificence. They simply arrived and began moving toward our patrol fleets. The Emperor stood and walked to the tactical display. It showed the border region, where their forces were engaged in the final conquest of coalition space. New contacts were marked in blue, indicating unknown vessels. 300 ships. Likely another minor species, trying to be heroes. Krexhai gestured dismissively. Order Admiral Vex Cole to deal with them. Use the usual tactics. Capture some of their vessels if possible. We can study their technology before we decide whether to conquer or exterminate them. The advisor hesitated. Your Magnificence, Admiral Vex Cole, attempted to engage them. Attempted? His patrol fleet has been destroyed. The Emperor turned slowly. Admiral Vex Cole commanded 30 ships, all heavily armed and experienced in combat. Destroying such a force should have required significant effort and losses. How many enemy ships were destroyed? The advisor's breathing became more rapid. None, Your Magnificence. Silence filled the throne chamber. Emperor Krexhai stared at the tactical display, trying to process what he was hearing. Explain. The engagement lasted 12 minutes. Admiral Vex Cole's fleet was completely destroyed. No human ships were lost. Our surviving communication logs show that human weapons penetrated our shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The Emperor moved to his command console and called up the battle recordings. What he saw made no sense. The human ships moved with impossible coordination, their formations shifting like a single organism with multiple bodies. Their weapons fired with precision that seemed to predict where Vex-High ships would move. Most disturbing was the complete lack of hesitation. When Vex Cole's forces tried to use captured coalition civilians as shields, the human weapons simply eliminated the Vex's high ships without harming the hostages. The precision required for such shots was beyond anything the Emperor had seen. "Get me Admiral Thexnal immediately," he ordered. Admiral Thexnal commanded the Empire's most experienced fleet, currently stationed near the coalition world of Thys Minor. Her force of 200 ships was supervising the final bombardment of civilian targets. The Admiral's image appeared on the display. Her expression was confident, unaware of what had happened at the border. "Your Magnificence, we are proceeding with the bombardment as ordered. The coalition inhabitants are using their children as negotiating leverage. But we are maintaining pressure. Admiral, you have new priorities. A species called humans has destroyed Admiral Vex Cole's entire patrol fleet. I want you to intercept and eliminate them before they can interfere with our operations." Thexnal's confidence flickered. "Destroyed Vex Cole? How many enemy ships are we facing?" "Approximately 300. But they appear to have superior weapons technology. Use maximum force. Do not attempt to capture prisoners." "Understood, Your Magnificence. We will deal with these humans." The transmission ended. Emperor Krexhai returned to the tactical display, watching as Admiral Thexnal's fleet moved to intercept the human forces approaching Thys Minor. 2 hours later, his communication system chimed with an emergency signal. "Your Magnificence," came Thexnal's voice, tight with panic. "We are under attack. The humans. They're not fighting like anything we've encountered. Report your situation, Admiral. They appear to know exactly where we are at all times. Our stealth systems are useless. When we try to maneuver, they're already in position to counter us. Their ships coordinate like they share a single mind." The Emperor could hear weapons fire in the background. 50. But they fight like 500. Their targeting systems. They hit our ships in places that cause maximum damage with minimum energy expenditure. It's like they studied our ship designs for years. Use the civilian shields. The humans will not risk killing innocent coalition members." There was a long pause. When Thexnal spoke again, her voice was filled with something the Emperor had never heard from her before. Fear. "Your Magnificence, the humans are destroying our ships without harming the civilians. Their weapons are precise enough to eliminate our vessels, while leaving hostages completely unharmed." The tactical display suddenly showed new alerts. Human ships were appearing throughout Vex-High space, not just at the coalition border. They emerged from hyperspace near military installations, communication hubs, and supply depots across a dozen systems. "How is this possible?" the Emperor whispered. His military advisor was monitoring communication channels throughout the Empire. "Your Magnificence, we're receiving reports from all sectors. Human forces are attacking our installations with complete knowledge of their locations and defenses. They have intelligence assets throughout our territory," the Emperor realized. "They've been watching us." "For how long?" Before anyone could answer, The main display showed an incoming transmission. The image resolved into a human face. The being was middle-aged, with calm eyes and an expression of absolute certainty. I am Captain Lee Min-jung of the human vessel Retribution. You are Emperor Krexhai of the Vexhai Empire. I am. What do you want, human? We want you to surrender unconditionally and submit to trial for genocide. You have committed systematic murder of civilian populations. This is unacceptable. The Emperor's rage overcame his confusion. You dare make demands of me? I rule 40 systems and 5,000 ships. You are nothing but another minor species that will be crushed. Captain Lee's expression didn't change. Emperor, you currently have 3,412 functional military vessels. Our intelligence is very accurate. The specific number sent a chill through Krexhai. How could they know his exact fleet strength? In the past 4 hours, you have lost 637 ships to human forces. You will continue to lose approximately 150 ships per hour until you surrender or until your military capacity is completely eliminated. Impossible. You only have 300 ships. We have 300 ships in the 5th Expeditionary Fleet. We also have other assets that have been positioned throughout your territory for the past 18 months. Lee paused. Emperor, we know the location of every military installation, every command center, and every ship in your empire. We know which of your officers have committed war crimes and which have simply followed orders. We know everything? The Emperor stared at the display, finally understanding the scope of what he faced. This wasn't a random intervention by a minor species. This was a planned operation by a civilization that had been preparing for this moment. What are your terms? Complete surrender of all military forces, immediate cessation of all offensive operations against civilian populations, submission to war crimes tribunals according to galactic law. Captain Lee leaned forward. These are not negotiations, Emperor. These are the terms of your surrender. And if I refuse? Then the Vexhai Empire ceases to exist as a functional government within 72 hours. The transmission ended. Emperor Krexhai stood alone in his throne chamber, watching as red markers disappeared from the tactical display one by one. Each marker represented a military installation or fleet being systematically destroyed by forces he couldn't see coming. For the first time in his reign, the Emperor of the Vexhai faced an enemy that fought wars the way his people committed genocide. With cold, methodical efficiency, and no mercy for those who refused to surrender. Colonel Choi Sung-min stood on the bridge of the assault transport Iron Will, watching this miner grow larger in the view screen. The coalition world was brown and scarred, where it should have been green and blue. Vexhai bioweapons had poisoned vast sections of the planet's surface. Colonel, we have visual confirmation of civilian holding facilities, reported Lieutenant Park Hee-jin from the sensor station. Approximately 50,000 coalition citizens are being held in 3 locations around the primary city. Choi nodded grimly. The Vexhai had gathered the surviving population into camps, using them as living shields around their military installations. It was a tactic that had worked against other species. It would not work against humans. What's the status of orbital defenses? All Vexhai orbital platforms have been eliminated by the fleet. We have complete control of space around the planet. The lieutenant paused. The money. The money. The money. The money. However, ground-based weapons are still active and positioned near civilian areas. The colonel studied the tactical display. Red markers showed Vexhai positions scattered throughout the ruined city. Each position was deliberately placed to maximize civilian casualties if attacked conventionally. Communications, patch me through to Admiral Park. Admiral Park's weathered face appeared on the display. Behind him, the bridge of the Unconquerable hummed with activity as his staff coordinated the assault on multiple Vexhai worlds. Colonel Choi, status report. Sir, we're ready to begin ground operations. The Vex High have positioned their forces to use civilians as shields. But we have solutions for each installation. How long for complete planetary liberation? Choi consulted his planning data. 18 hours for military objectives. An additional 6 hours to establish civilian medical and relief stations. Acceptable. You are authorized to begin operations. Rules of engagement remain in effect. Understood, sir. No civilian casualties, no prisoners who surrender, and complete documentation of all war crimes evidence. The transmission ended. Colonel Choi turned to his assault team commanders. 12 officers stood around the briefing table, each representing a specialized unit trained for exactly this type of operation. Gentlemen, ladies, we have 50,000 civilian lives depending on our precision. The Vex High believe they can hide behind hostages. Major Kim So-young, the sniper specialist, spoke first. Colonel, we have clear sight lines to 70% of enemy positions. Our targeting systems can eliminate sentries without alerting nearby forces. What about the remaining 30%? Captain Lee Donghwan stepped forward. Close quarters elimination, sir. My teams can neutralize Vex High forces in enclosed spaces without endangering civilians. We've studied their building layouts from captured intelligence. Colonel Choi activated the holographic display. It showed a three-dimensional map of the city below, with civilian locations marked in blue and enemy positions in red. The Vex High have made a critical error in their tactics. They assume we'll attack their positions directly. Instead, we're going to extract the civilians first. Lieutenant Commander Park Min-seo, the engineering specialist, indicated several points on the map. Sir, we can use underground tunnels to access civilian holding areas. The Vex High haven't blocked the old municipal systems. How long to evacuate 50,000 people through tunnels? 4 hours if we use all available routes simultaneously. The colonel smiled grimly. The Vex High are watching the sky for our attack. They won't expect us to come from below. 2 hours later, human forces began the most complex civilian rescue operation in military history. While Vex High sentries watched for orbital strikes and aerial assaults, human engineering teams quietly accessed tunnel systems throughout the city. The operation proceeded with mechanical precision. Teams emerged at predetermined points, eliminated Vex High guards with silent weapons, and began evacuating civilians through routes the enemy didn't know existed. Colonel Choi monitored progress from the command center established in the tunnels beneath the city. Status reports came in every 15 minutes. Sector 7 clear. 200 civilians evacuated. 6 enemy casualties. Sector 12 secure. Vex High Research Facility discovered. Requesting War Crimes Investigation Team. Quote, Vex High Research. Quote, CEA. Vex High Research. Sector 4 complete. Found evidence of biological experimentation on coalition children. All subjects rescued alive. The reports painted a picture of systematic cruelty that made Choi's jaw tighten. The Vex High hadn't just conquered the coalition worlds. They had turned them into laboratories for testing new forms of genocide. Colonel, came the voice of Captain Lee. We've found the primary research facility. You need to see this. Choi made his way through the tunnels to Sector 9, where Lee's team had discovered a massive underground complex. Human soldiers stood guard outside laboratories filled with equipment that made Choi's stomach turn. They were testing bioweapons on captured civilians, Lee reported. Trying to develop diseases that would target specific coalition genetic markers. Survivors? 43, sir. All in critical condition, but our medics think they can save most of them. Colonel Choi walked through the facility, documenting everything with his personal recorder. This evidence would be crucial during the war crimes trials. The Vex High hadn't just committed murder. They had committed scientific torture. Sir, incoming transmission from Orbital Command, reported his communications officer. The display showed Admiral Park aboard the Unconquerable. Colonel, we've been monitoring Vex High military communications. They're becoming aware that something is wrong. Add a bit 5. Add a bit 9. Add a bit 9. Add a bit 9. How much more time do we need? 6 hours for complete civilian evacuation. 2 additional hours to secure all evidence of war crimes. Admiral Park nodded. You have 8 hours before we begin the final phase. The Vex High ground forces will be eliminated simultaneously once all civilians are clear. Understood, sir. The next 6 hours tested human precision and coordination like nothing in their military history. Every civilian had to be located, evacuated, and medically assessed, while Vex High forces remained unaware of the operation. Every piece of evidence had to be collected and preserved for future trials. When the evacuation was complete, Colonel Choi stood in the empty civilian holding areas and activated his communication system. All units, this is Colonel Choi. Civilian evacuation is complete. All evidence has been secured. You are authorized to begin final elimination of remaining Vex High forces. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human forces that had spent hours moving silently through tunnels now emerged throughout the city. Vex High positions that had seemed secure behind civilian shields suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies who appeared from nowhere. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it ended, every Vex High soldier on Thys Minor was either dead or in custody. Not a single civilian had been harmed. Colonel Choi stood in the ruins of the Vex High Command Center, watching human engineers begin setting up refugee facilities and medical stations. The same forces that had eliminated an occupying army with surgical precision were now providing food, shelter, and medical care to the liberated population. His communications system chimed with reports from other worlds. Thys Major liberated, 28,000 civilians rescued. Kithara Prime secured. Vex High research facilities destroyed, evidence preserved. Coalition worlds, 4 through 7, are free of enemy forces. In 18 hours, human forces had liberated 7 worlds, rescued over 300,000 civilians, and eliminated an entire occupation army while suffering minimal casualties themselves. Colonel Choi looked up at the sky, where human ships maintained orbital security, while others brought in supplies and medical equipment. The coalition had asked for aid, and humanity had provided exactly what they needed. Complete liberation, and the promise that this would never happen again. The Vex High Empire had learned too late that Deathworlders don't offer aid. They come with armadas, and they stay until the job is finished. Emperor Krex High stood before the human tribunal with his hands bound behind his back. The once mighty ruler of 40 systems wore simple prison clothes instead of his ceremonial armor. His empire had lasted less than 72 hours after the humans announced their terms. The tribunal chamber was filled with representatives from every species that had suffered under Vex High expansion. Thys Ka, of the Kithara Coalition, sat in the front row, watching as justice finally came for those who had tried to destroy his people. Admiral Park Jin-soo served as the senior military representative on the tribunal. His voice was calm and professional as he read the charges. Emperor Krex High, you are charged with genocide, crimes against sentient beings, systematic torture, and the use of biological weapons against civilian populations. Evidence has been presented documenting your direct orders to eliminate 7 distinct species and your personal supervision of research facilities designed to develop new forms of mass murder. The Emperor said nothing. His legal advocate, appointed by galactic law, had already explained that the evidence was overwhelming. Human documentation was thorough and precise. How do you plead to these charges? Krex High looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose families his forces had murdered. Finally, he spoke. I plead not guilty. I was protecting the security of the Vex High Empire against inferior species that threatened our expansion. A murmur ran through the chamber. Even his own legal advocate looked disappointed. Judge Advocate General Park Soo-min, the senior human legal officer, made notes on her datapad. The defendant pleads not guilty. Tribunal will review evidence and render judgment according to established galactic law. The trial took 3 days. Human intelligence officers presented communications intercepts, proving that HFY had personally ordered the extermination of Coalition children. Coalition survivors testified about bioweapon testing and systematic torture. HFY officers who had surrendered provided testimony about orders they had received from the Emperor himself. The evidence was so overwhelming that even the Emperor's advocates stopped trying to argue innocence and focused on requesting mercy. On the 4th day, the tribunal delivered its verdict. Emperor HFY, this tribunal finds you guilty of all charges. You are sentenced to life imprisonment on a secure facility where you will have no contact with any HFY forces or sympathizers. Judge Park paused. Additionally, the HFY Empire is hereby dissolved as a political entity. All former imperial worlds will be placed under temporary human administration until stable local governments can be established. Tiska felt a weight lift from his heart. Justice had been served. But more importantly, the threat was gone forever. After the trial, he met with Ambassador Zayla Kim Shaw at the Coalition's temporary headquarters on Nexus Prime. The human diplomat was reviewing reports from the liberated Coalition worlds. Representative Thiska, I have good news. Our agricultural specialists report that HFY bioweapons can be neutralized. Your worlds will be fully habitable again within 2 years. That is wonderful news, Ambassador. But I must ask a difficult question. Zayla looked up from her datapad. What question? What happens now? The Coalition is grateful beyond words for what humanity has done, but we are also concerned. Concerned about what? Thiska gestured toward the window, where human warships maintained patrol around Nexus Prime. Your people eliminated a 40-system empire in 3 days. You did it with such efficiency that it was more like watching a machine than a war. What's to stop humanity from becoming the next threat to galactic peace? Zayla was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Representative, let me tell you about human history. We spent thousands of years fighting each other before we learned to work together. We know what war costs, because we've paid that price ourselves. She stood up and walked to the window. We didn't develop our military doctrine to conquer other species. We developed it to prevent what happened to your people from happening to anyone else. But you could conquer anyone you chose. Yes, we could. But conquest isn't our goal. Protection is. Zayla turned back to face him. Representative, humanity is establishing something new in this galaxy. We call it the Intervention Doctrine. What is that? A formal galactic protocol that declares genocide to be an automatic trigger for human military response. Any species that attempts systematic extermination of another species will face immediate intervention by human forces. Thiska felt his breathing slow. You're appointing yourselves as galactic protectors. We're accepting the responsibility that comes with our capabilities. Other species can choose to accept this new reality or challenge it. Zayla's expression was serious. But the choice is binary. Either genocide becomes impossible in this galaxy, or species that attempt it cease to exist. The implications were staggering. No empire could expand through extermination while humanity existed to prevent it. No species would face destruction alone, while human fleets patrolled the galaxy. What about the Coalition? What's our role in this new order? Ambassador Kim Shaw smiled. The Coalition rebuilds with human assistance. We're providing military advisors to help you establish modern defense forces. We're sharing agricultural technology to restore your poisoned worlds. And we're offering full membership in humanity's mutual defense network. A mutual defense network? Any species that agrees to the intervention doctrine becomes part of a galactic community that humanity will protect from genocide. In exchange, member species agree to never attempt genocide themselves and to provide what support they can for intervention operations. Thiska thought about his people, slowly returning to their poisoned worlds under human protection. The Coalition would survive. More than that, They would never again face extinction alone. The coalition accepts membership in your mutual defense network. Excellent. You'll find that most species are making the same choice. Zayla returned to her desk. Representative, the galaxy is entering a new age. War hasn't ended, but genocide has. That's what my species calls progress. 6 months later, Thiska stood on the observation deck of the Coalition Council building on restored This Minor. The world was green again, thanks to human environmental technology. Coalition children played in parks that had been poisoned wastelands under Vex High occupation. Human ships still patrolled Coalition space. But now they flew alongside Coalition vessels crewed by beings trained in modern defense doctrine. The Coalition was no longer helpless. A communication alert drew his attention to the main display. Admiral Park was broadcasting from the Unconquerable, now stationed permanently in the region as a deterrent to any future threats. Representative Thiska, we've received word that the Hegemony Council is formally requesting membership in the Intervention Protocol. That brings our total membership to 47 species. Any holdouts? 3 minor empires that still practice slavery, and the sovereignty of eternal darkness, which refuses all outside contact. Park shrugged. They'll either change their ways or find themselves isolated in a galaxy that no longer tolerates systematic oppression. The transmission ended. Thiska looked out at his restored world and thought about the message they had sent to humanity so many months ago. They had asked for any aid possible to help their people survive. Humanity had given them something far better than survival. They had given the Coalition and 46 other species the promise that genocide would never threaten them again. The galaxy had new protectors now. Protectors who didn't offer aid when they saw atrocities. Protectors who came with armadas and stayed until the job was finished. Thiska watched human and Coalition children playing together in the park below and smiled. His people were safe. All their people were safe. And they would stay that way as long as humanity existed to keep its promises. In space above, the human fleet maintained its eternal watch, ready to respond within hours to any threat against any member of their growing galactic family. The age of genocide was over. The age of protection had begun.